Hi everyone, hello English readers, and welcome to episode 18 of the podcast Read in English. I'm Lydie Bureau and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations of classics of English literature or contemporary novels as well. And once a week, I meet the members of my book club, and we discuss over Zoom about the chapters that we read over the week or the parts of the book that we read over the week. And we also talk about books in general and learning English. And today, I'm delighted to introduce you to Louisa May Alcott and her worldwide known novel called Little Women, published in 2 volumes, one in 1868 and the second one in 1869. So here is the novel, the original novel, and here is the adaptation that I will be reading next week. But I will talk about it more at the end of the podcast. Okay. So yeah, we are going to talk more about Louisa May Alcott, so the author of Little Women, today in this podcast. And thank you, Katie, for being here and attending this live. I hope you had a beautiful day and that you're ready to know more about this amazing and prolific writer, Louisa May. Okay, so Louisa May Alcott was born in 1832 in Pennsylvania, but lived most of her life in Massachusetts. So it's basically the East Coast of America. She was the second of 4 daughters, and her father was a well-known philosopher and a teacher who always encouraged her to write. So Louisa May was raised in a family of transcendentalists from Germany. So the transcendentalists believe that God exists everywhere. So it's a very nature-centric form of Christianity, and they all worshipped Goethe's literary work, whether there were novels, whether it was his novels or poetry as well. And actually, in Little Women, there are several references to Goethe's poetry and philosophical reflections as well. In 30 years, her family moved 22 times, as her father was very bad with money, and he constantly borrowed money from his friends, his family, and his own daughters and wife. So they couldn't really trust him to save money. He was very anti-materialistic and didn't really pay much attention to money and how to manage money. So in 1857, they eventually settled in Orchard House in Concord. It's a town near Boston. And this is a 2-story clapboard farmhouse, and it is considered as a very old colonial house for the Americans. And it is in this very house that Louisa May Alcott wrote her novel, Little Women, and used it as an inspiration for the setting of the story. Okay, so I will encourage you as well to see the picture. So it's a very old clapboard house. Is basically a house, very typical American house that you can see maybe in films. There is this series called Outlanders, and you can clearly see the type of clapboard farmhouse typical in the colonial area. So era, sorry. So that's the type of house. And you can actually visit the house. It's now a museum, and it's a must-see if you're near Boston to visit the Orchard House. So from an early age, Alcott had to go to work as her family was poor. She worked as a teacher. She was a seamstress, sorry, not a mistress, a seamstress, a governess, a domestic helper, and finally a writer. Also, her sisters worked as seamstresses, and her mother worked what we would call today as a social worker amongst the Irish immigrants at the time. So when the American Civil War, so 1861 to 1865, broke out, Alcott served as a nurse for 6 weeks, but she contracted typhoid, sorry, and became very ill. And she will never really recover from the disease, and she will die from the consequences of contracting typhoid. So from this experience, she published Hospital Sketches, is in 1863, for which she received her first critical recognition for her observations and humor about the war and her own experience as a nurse in a hospital. So it was a first work that was published, and it was very well received. Okay, now Little Women is semi-autobiographical, sorry, for Alcott was directly inspired by her own family, her own 4 sisters, to depict the main characters of her novel. And it starts with Anna Alcott Pratt, the eldest of the Alcott sisters, and she was the basis for the character of Margaret. Similarly to her character Jo, Louisa May was deeply affected when her sister got married at 29. She wrote in her journals, "I mourn the loss of my Nan." Her name was Anna, so her nickname must have been Nan for her. "And I'm not comforted." So in chapter 23 of Little Women, we can read, so I'm going to quote the text now. "Jo cried and scolded tempestuously as she told the awful news to Beth and Amy. The little girls, however, considered it as a most agreeable and interesting event, and Jo got little comfort from them." So you can see the same use of vocabulary. So she went up to her refuge in the garret and confided her troubles to the rats. That's kind of humorous here. The garret is the attic. So Louisa May herself was the basis for Jo, or Josephine, an inspiring writer, tomboy, unlikely to wed, and always taking care of family. And as you can notice, Jo is it's chosen to be ambiguous about the gender. Yeah, it's gender, non-gender name. It can be as well associated to a man or a woman, and that was intentional from Louisa May, who had who studies on her work suggests that she was a lesbian, and she wanted to, she had preferred probably to be a man or something like that. So yeah, so you can see very subtle elements in the novel that confirms those suggestions about the author, and tell a lot about the author. And now, Elizabeth Sewell Alcott, or Lizzie, was the basis for the character of Beth. In 1856, Lizzie contracted actually the scarlet fever while helping a poor German family, similarly to Beth in the novel, who also contracted scarlet fever, helping the Hummel, I think, the German family, the poor family. And she recovered, so Louisa May's sister recovered, but was permanently weakened and died at the age of 22. So similarly to the character of Beth, but who was very weakened by the disease, and died also, we can assume at the same, more or less the same age. Abigail May Alcott Neerica, or May, was the basis for the character of Amy, the last sister, the youngest of the Alcott sisters, and also the youngest of the March sisters. And you can see here the play with the letters, how Louisa May Alcott played with the letters. So Abigail May Alcott was called May, and Louisa May changed the name into Amy. So she inversed the letters and called the character Amy. She was an artist, and she also was the only sister able to go to public school. And later on, it was Louisa who supported her studies in Europe. So she was the lucky sister who managed to go to public school and to continue her studies. The two sisters, and in contrast with the novel, if you remember, Amy manages to go abroad, to go to Europe, because her aunt is offering her to come with her. But in reality, here it's Louisa who paid the studies for her sister. So the two sisters were very close, although sometimes Louisa was jealous of her, as everything seemed to be easy for her sister, and she always got what she wanted. while Louisa had to provide for the family all the time. So there was, they might have been some conflicts between the two sisters, but they really loved each other anyway. At first, Louisa May wasn't really interested in writing a girl's story, as she called it. It is, in fact, from the request of Thomas Niles, her publisher, that she got the idea of creating the March family. And in the introduction of this edition of Little Women from Penguin Classics, written by Ellen Showalter, I use that quote: "I plod away, though I don't enjoy the sort of thing. Never liked girls or knew many except my sisters, but our queer plays and experiences may prove interesting, though I doubt it." So that's Louisa May probably writing in one of her journals about the fact that she wasn't really keen on writing for girls or really interested. And she also doubted that that the stories of her sisters and herself playing those games would be interesting for people. So when the first volume of Little Women was published in October 1868, it was a huge success. By the end of October, 2,000 copies had been sold. Immediately, her publisher requested a sequel, and in April 1869, so not even November, November, December, January, February, March. Yeah, barely 6 months after the publication of the first volume, she wrote in the space of 5 months, 5 months, 5 months. Yeah, she wrote the second volume. So she got really inspired. So this, in April 1869, the second volume was published, although she wasn't keen on writing a follow-up of the book again. I quote, "I don't like sequels, and I don't think number 2 will be as popular as number 1. But publishers are very perverse and won't let authors have their way, so my Little Women must grow up and be married off in a very stupid style." So we have a sense here of what she thought about the book and writing a sequel. But anyway, she got very inspired in a way because, or probably she was pressured as well by the publisher to write to finish the second volume quickly. And in the months following the publication of part 2, she had sold 13,000 copies. So she sold even more of the volume 2 than volume 1. By the end of the year, Louisa had made $8,500 in royalties. Her hard times as a writer was over, and she could now easily support her family. Although Alcott wrote a simple little girl's story, she tried to infuse the notions of egalitarian marriages in which women could continue to work and be creative. Also, she brilliantly managed to create vivid, credible, and enduring characters that will advocate as much for their financial independence and their artistic ambitions, mainly identifiable in Jo's character. Despite Alcott's conflicted views on sexuality, marriage, and love, I believe personally that this novel has laid the foundation of the first feminist views in America in the 19th century. In fact, she was the first woman to register to vote in her hometown, Concord, in Massachusetts. She never married, as she valued too much her independence and freedom. And in the novel, she made a point of defending the spinsterhood status and the importance of their role in the social and family sphere. So in chapter 43, she writes, "Don't laugh at spinsters, dear girls, for often very tender, tragical romances are hidden away in the hearts that beat so quietly under the sober gowns and many silent sacrifices of youth, health, ambition, love itself, make faded faces beautiful in God's sight." So this might be one of the reasons probably that researchers and scholars suggest that she probably stayed a spinster because she was probably in love with another woman, and at the time you can get married and wasn't socially acceptable to live with another woman or the same sex. So with a partner of the same sex. So we don't really know whether whether it was voluntary to stay a spinster or if it was by default, and because she could not live with maybe the woman that she loved. That's that we don't know. We can just speculate. But here we can feel a sense that she had to sacrifice a lot to be able to live the life she wanted, and that she probably wasn't always happy. And I like the fact that she makes a point here about this spinster status and the fact that these women had an important role in society because she was the one who took care of both of her parents until they died. She was at their bedside until their last breath. She took care of them physically, in the sense that she was nursing them, but also financially. She supported her parents all her life, and occasionally probably her sisters, Amy for sure, and she also took care of them in terms of health, and really accompanied accompanied them until the end of their lives, while the other sisters were married and had to take care of their own family. So luckily, the parents had someone that they could count on to be looked after, to look after them. So otherwise it would have been more complicated, or probably the parents wouldn't have lived as long as they did, probably. So yeah, and there is another part in following that quote in chapter 43. She also talks about the fact that all those aunties, they also take care and give advice to their nieces and nephews, and also look after them as well when when it's needed. So you can see also that it expands to other members of the family as well. So I think that it is an important aspect of the novel that it's good to highlight here. So if we look at her publishing work, she leaves a monumental literary legacy behind her. And that's probably because we know so much about Little Women. I mean, this novel is so popular and such a phenomenon that we forget that she lives so many other novels and short stories behind her. She was a very prolific writer. She published a novel almost every year, in addition to the short stories, sketches, and journals that she wrote. And to my surprise, I learned that not only she has been read by many little girls all over the world, but she dramatically influenced one in particular, who will become the figure of the second wave of feminism. So here again, we can see that it is a groundbreaking novel in feminism as well. Because the French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, Simone de Beauvoir, who was a philosopher and a feminist figure of the second wave, wrote about Alcott in her autobiography called Memoirs of a Dutiful Daughter in 1958, because she also, Simone de Beauvoir, also struggled with what was expected of her as a girl, as a woman, as a dutiful daughter, a little woman, and her own aspirations and independence, financial and professional as well. And similarly, so she found so many, I believe that she related in many aspects to Louisa May Alcott, in this, or in the characters of Louisa May Alcott, because Louisa May also struggled with that vision of being a dutiful daughter, although she regarded herself as a dutiful daughter, but with a strong desire to become someone, and have a big ambition about for her life. And so that was an interesting fact that I learned in reading the introduction. Is in the very first page of the novel, written in the introduction of that edition of the novel, written by Elaine Showalter, who mentions that about Simone de Beauvoir, and the fact that she quoted Louisa May Alcott as an influence in her writing work. So I was so amazed to see that how we look at this novel, and also the film's adaptations of this novel, and the cultural, the popular view of that novel, that it is actually saying so much about her feminist views. This is, to me, a feminist novel. And I wish we could, I mean, scholars and also the general culture would regard this novel as much more than it seemed to be. So I hope you enjoyed getting to know about Louisa May Alcott, and that you will get even more excited to attend the live reading of Little Women. So next week, I'm going to do the live reading of this adaptation of Little Women. So it's been adapted by Penguin Readers, and it is for A1 or beginners, and it's mainly it is adapted in a way that it looks like a sequential, it has a sequential illustrated format. So that's why I mentioned that it was a kids adaptation. So it's more likely to attract young readers. But if you have a beginner level in English, then why not read together this novel? So that's why I will use one podcast episode dedicated to the reading of the whole adaptation. And in addition to this, I announced to you that from the 13th of May until the 20th of May, we are going to read the graded reader adaptation of Jane Eyre. Yay! So this novel was written by Charlotte Bronte, and it is adapted for A2 plus levels, which is the equivalent of upper beginner. So you need to have quite good basic knowledge of English, and make sure that you subscribe to the book club membership to be part of this journey. And new content will come with this live reading as well, if you're part of the book club. So I hope you will subscribe to the book club and start reading Jane Eyre with us to improve your English through reading and literary conversation. I hope you enjoyed, Katie, this podcast about Louisa May Alcott. I hope that you found interesting facts about the writer, maybe some information that you knew before. It was a real pleasure. Thank you. You're welcome. You're welcome. It was a real pleasure to dive into this novel and into Louisa May Alcott's life as well. I wish you a beautiful end of the day, and I see you next week. Bye.